The number 42 bus lurched to a stop at 5th and Market, its brakes squealing in protest. Jake Morrison shuffled toward the rear doors with the rest of the morning commuters, his backpack slung over one shoulder of his gray hoodie. At 28, he'd been riding this bus for 3 years, ever since he'd started his job as a junior architect at Morrison & Klein. The firm had his last name, but that was pure coincidence. He wasn't a partner, just a hard-working employee trying to make his student loan payments and save enough to maybe, someday, afford his own place instead of the studio apartment he shared with too many cockroaches. The bus was crowded, as always during rush hour. Jake found a spot near the middle, holding onto the overhead rail as more passengers squeezed in. That's when he noticed her. She stood near the front, and Jake's first thought was that she looked completely out of place on a city bus. She had a sleek bob haircut, perfectly styled, and wore a black leather jacket over what looked like expensive clothing. Everything about her spoke of sophistication and success, from her subtle makeup to her confident posture. She was also staring at the card reader with an expression Jake recognized immediately, the universal look of someone whose transit card had just failed. The bus driver, a heavy-set man with no patience for morning delays, was already shaking his head. "Lady, if your card doesn't work, you gotta pay cash or get off. I got a schedule." "I'm so sorry," the woman said, her voice calm but clearly flustered. "I don't have cash on me. I always use my card, but apparently it's expired. Could you possibly—" "No exceptions," the driver interrupted. "Cash or card. Those are the rules." Jake watched as the woman opened her designer purse, clearly hoping to find some forgotten bills, but came up empty. Other passengers were starting to grumble about the delay. Someone in the back shouted for her to just get off the bus. Jake's hand was moving toward his wallet before he'd consciously decided to help. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. She'd always taught him and his sister that when you could help someone, you did. Simple as that. "Excuse me," Jake said, making his way forward. "I've got it." He pulled out his wallet, a worn leather thing that had been a high school graduation gift from his late father, and extracted a crisp dollar bill. It was literally one of $5 he had until payday on Friday, but the woman clearly needed it more than he did right now. "Here," Jake said, handing the bill to the driver. "For her fare." The woman turned to look at him, and Jake felt his breath catch slightly. Up close, she was even more striking, with warm brown eyes that held both surprise and something else he couldn't quite identify. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. "It's just $1. Jake replied with an easy smile. "And the driver's right, he's got a schedule. We're all trying to get to work." The driver took the dollar and the bus lurched forward. The woman moved deeper into the bus, and Jake followed simply because that's where the available space was. They ended up standing side by side, both holding the same overhead rail. "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes. "That was very kind of you. I'm Victoria." "Jake," he replied. "And really, it's no big deal. I've been there. The card that won't work, no cash, feeling like everyone's staring at you. It happens. Still, you didn't have to help a stranger?" Victoria studied him with curiosity. "Most people in this city would have just been annoyed at the delay." Jake shrugged. "My mom always said we're supposed to look out for each other. Besides, it's just $1. I think I can spare it." Something in Victoria's expression shifted, a softness that hadn't been there before. "What do you do, Jake?" "I'm an architect. Well, junior architect. Still learning, still paying my dues." He smiled self-deprecatingly. "Mostly I make coffee and draft revisions. But someday I'll design actual buildings." "I'm sure you will," Victoria said, and there was something in her tone that suggested genuine confidence in him, which was odd from someone who'd known him for all of 90 seconds. They rode in comfortable silence for a few stops. Then Victoria spoke again. "Can I ask you something? Why did you help me?" "Honestly?" Jake thought about it. "I guess because it's what I'd want someone to do for me. And because—" he paused, considering his words. "Because I think most people are basically good. They just need a reminder sometimes that we're all in this together." Victoria was quiet, but Jake saw something flicker across her face, emotion, recognition, perhaps a touch of sadness. "That's a rare perspective," she finally said. "Especially in this city." "Maybe," Jake agreed. "But I'd rather believe the best in people than assume the worst." The bus pulled up to Jake's stop. "This is me," he said. "It was nice meeting you, Victoria. I hope the rest of your day goes better." "Wait," Victoria said quickly, pulling a business card from her purse. "Please take this. I'd like to repay you for the fare. And perhaps we could have coffee sometime?" Jake took the card, glancing at it briefly. "Victoria Ashford, CEO, Ashford Industries." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Okay, that's impressive. But you really don't need to repay me. It was just $1. "Please," Victoria said, and there was something vulnerable in her eyes. "I insist." "Call me." Jake nodded, pocketing the card. "Okay, I will." He stepped off the bus, and as it pulled away, he could see Victoria watching him through the window. That evening, back in his small studio apartment, Jake looked at the business card while eating ramen noodles for dinner, a meal choice dictated by his remaining $4 until payday. Victoria Ashford. He pulled out his phone and did a quick search. His jaw dropped. Victoria Ashford wasn't just a CEO. She was the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the country, a self-made billionaire who'd built Ashford Industries from the ground up. There were articles about her business acumen, her innovations in sustainable technology, her philanthropy, and he'd given her bus fare. Jake started laughing, quietly at first, then harder. Of all the people to help on the bus, he'd assisted someone who probably had more money in her wallet than he'd make in a year. The irony was almost too much. But then he remembered the way she'd looked at him, the genuine gratitude in her eyes, the vulnerability when she'd asked why he'd helped. Whatever her bank account said, in that moment, she'd been just another person in need of kindness. Jake picked up his phone and called the number on the card before he could overthink it. "Hello?" Victoria's voice answered, sounding both professional and slightly uncertain. "Hi, this is Jake. From the bus this morning. You said something about coffee?" There was a pause, then Victoria's voice came back warmer. "Jake, I'm so glad you called." "Yes, coffee? When are you free?" "I work until 6 most days," Jake said. "But I'm off this Saturday if that works." "Saturday is perfect," Victoria said. "There's a cafe near the park, Riverside Coffee House. Do you know it?" "I do," Jake said, even though he'd never been there because their coffee cost what he usually spent on lunch. 10 a.m.? Victoria suggested. "I'll be there." Saturday morning, Jake showed up at Riverside Coffee House wearing his best jeans and a button-down shirt, the same outfit he wore to client presentations at work. He spotted Victoria immediately. She sat at a corner table, wearing casual clothes that somehow still looked elegant, her hair down in soft waves instead of the sleek bob from the bus. She smiled when she saw him, and Jake felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. "Jake," she said warmly as he approached. "Thank you for coming." "Thanks for the invitation," Jake replied, sliding into the seat across from her. "Though I have to admit, after I looked you up, I almost didn't call. Figured you probably didn't need to have coffee with the guy who gave you bus fare." Victoria's smile turned slightly sad. "That's exactly why I wanted you to call. Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I've been taking that bus for 2 weeks," Victoria said quietly. "It's not my usual transportation. I have a driver, a car, all the privileges that come with my position. But I've been feeling disconnected, like I'm living in a bubble, surrounded by people who only see my title and my bank account. So I've been taking the bus, everything. Going to regular coffee shops, trying to remember what it's like to just be a person." She looked at Jake directly. "Do you know what happened every other time my card failed or I pretended not to have correct change?" Jake shook his head. "People ignored me. They complained about the delay. They suggested I get off the bus, but not one person offered to help. Until you." Victoria's eyes were bright. "You helped without knowing who I was, without expecting anything in return. You did it because it was the right thing to do." It was just $1, Jake said again. No, Victoria said firmly. It was kindness. It was humanity. It was everything I've been missing in my world of boardrooms and business deals and people who only care about what I can do for them. She reached across the table and took his hand, and Jake felt electricity at the touch. Jake, in the past 10 years of building my company, I've met thousands of people, CEOs, investors, politicians, celebrities, and none of them have looked at me the way you did on that bus, like I was just another person who needed help. Jake was quiet for a moment. Victoria, I'm a junior architect who lives in a studio apartment and eats ramen noodles for dinner. I ride the bus because I can't afford a car payment. Our worlds are completely different. World better. The same understanding that success without purpose was empty. As they left the cafe, Victoria turned to Jake. Can I see you again? I'd like that, Jake said honestly. But Victoria, you should know. I can't afford fancy restaurants, or are they? Victoria challenged. Or do we just have different bank balances? Because from where I'm sitting, I see someone with integrity, with kindness, with the kind of character that no amount of money can buy. That's what matters to me. Over coffee, which Victoria insisted on paying for, they talked for 3 hours. Jake told her about growing up in a working-class neighborhood, about his father who'd been a carpenter and taught him to build things with his hands, about his mother who'd worked 2 jobs to send him to architecture school. Victoria told him about building her company from nothing, about the loneliness that came with success, about missing the days when people saw her as just Victoria, not Victoria Ashford, CEO. Why did you become an architect? Victoria asked. Because buildings last, Jake said simply. Long after we're gone, the things we create remain. They shelter people, inspire people, become part of the city's story. I like the idea of leaving something behind that matters. Victoria's eyes were soft. That's beautiful. Why did you start your company? Jake asked. For the same reason, actually, Victoria said. I wanted to create something that would outlast me. Technology that would make the world better, cleaner, more sustainable. I wanted to matter beyond just making money. They discovered they had more in common than different. The same values, the same belief in trying to make the expensive activities. If we're going to do this, it's going to be bus rides and cheap coffee and... Jake, Victoria interrupted gently, I don't want fancy restaurants. I want someone who sees me. Someone who helped a stranger on a bus because it was the right thing to do. Someone who measures worth in character, not currency. She smiled. Besides, I've had expensive. It's overrated. Over the next few months, Jake and Victoria built something neither of them had expected. They explored the city on foot and by bus. They ate street food and discovered hole-in-the-wall restaurants. Victoria learned to appreciate the simple pleasure of a life not dictated by schedules and expectations. And Jake discovered that beneath the CEO title was a woman who just wanted to be seen for who she was, not what she'd accomplished. Victoria kept her identity private from Jake's friends and co-workers. She didn't want their relationship colored by her wealth or status. And Jake never treated her differently than he would any other woman he cared about. He paid for what he could afford, let her cover the rest without ego, and focused on building something real. 6 months after the bus ride, Victoria invited Jake to a company event, a gala celebrating Ashford Industries' 10th anniversary. It would be the first time Jake saw her full world, the first time they'd appear publicly together. Jake borrowed a suit from a friend and showed up at the elegant hotel ballroom feeling completely out of his depth. The room was filled with people who looked like they'd stepped out of magazines, wealthy, powerful, connected. Victoria found him near the entrance, and Jake's breath caught. She wore a stunning dress and looked every inch the CEO billionaire she was. For a moment, doubt crept in. How could he possibly fit into this world? But then Victoria smiled at him, that same genuine smile from the bus, and took his hand. Ready? She asked. Not even a little bit, Jake admitted. Good, Victoria said. Neither am I, usually, but with you here, I think I'll manage. She led him into the ballroom, and Jake noticed the stares, the whispers. Victoria Ashford had never brought a date to a company event before. Halfway through the evening, Victoria took the stage to give a speech about the company's accomplishments and future direction. Jake watched from the audience, seeing her in her element, confident, articulate, inspiring. But tonight, Victoria said, her eyes finding Jake in the crowd, I want to talk about something more important than profit margins or market share. I want to talk about the values that truly matter. She told the story of a morning on a bus, of a stranger who'd helped without knowing who she was, of a dollar that represented something priceless, the choice to see another person's humanity. I built this company on innovation and determination, Victoria said. But I'd lost sight of something fundamental, that success without compassion is meaningless, that all the money in the world can't buy genuine human connection, that sometimes the most valuable thing we can offer is simple kindness. She looked directly at Jake. Someone recently reminded me of that. He gave me bus fare when my card wouldn't work. $1. But what he really gave me was infinitely more valuable. He reminded me what it means to simply care about another person. The room was silent as Victoria continued. I'm announcing tonight that Ashford Industries will be launching a new initiative, community investment programs that focus not on profit, but on people. We'll be funding projects that matter to regular people, affordable housing, public transportation improvements, community centers, scholarship programs. Because I've learned that the measure of a company, like the measure of a person, isn't how much wealth we accumulate, but how we use that wealth to lift others up. The applause was thunderous, but Jake barely heard it. He was focused on Victoria, who'd stepped off the stage and was walking directly toward him. That was beautiful, he said when she reached him. It was true, Victoria replied. You changed my life, Jake. Not because you gave me $1, but because you reminded me who I wanted to be. You changed mine too, Jake said softly. You reminded me that people are people, regardless of what's in their bank account. That kindness and character matter more than anything else. They stood in the middle of the gala, surrounded by wealth and power and influence, but existing in their own small bubble of genuine connection. I'm in love with you, Victoria said, her voice barely audible above the room's noise. I've been falling in love with you since the moment you handed that $1 to the bus driver without hesitation, without expecting anything in return. I'm in love with your kindness, your integrity, your belief that people are basically good. I'm in love with you, Jake Morrison. Jake felt his heart expand. I'm in love with you too. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, but Victoria. The woman who takes the bus to remember what it's like to be human. The woman who wants to make the world better. The woman who sees me, really sees me, and makes me want to be better than I am. He kissed her there, in front of everyone, and didn't care who was watching or what they thought. 2 years later, Jake stood in front of a newly constructed building, a community center in the neighborhood where he'd grown up. It was his first major project as a full architect, funded by Ashford Industries' Community Investment Program. Victoria stood beside him, her hand in his, both of them dressed casually despite the official ribbon-cutting ceremony happening in an hour. You did it, Victoria said, looking up at the building with pride. You created something that will last, that will matter to this community. We did it, Jake corrected. You funded it, you believed in it, you made it possible. Victoria smiled. Partnership. That's what we're good at. They'd gotten engaged 6 months ago, a simple proposal on the same bus where they'd met, with Jake offering her a ring he'd saved months to afford. Victoria had cried and said yes immediately, and they'd ridden. Sometimes it changes. The bus to the end of the line, just talking about their future. Now that future was unfolding, Jake designing buildings that mattered, Victoria funding projects that changed lives, both of them using their respective gifts to make the world a little better. Do you ever regret it? Jake asked, voicing a fear he rarely expressed. Falling for the guy with the $1 instead of someone from your world? Victoria turned to face him fully. Jake, you are my world. You're the person who reminds me every day what really matters, who keeps me grounded when success threatens to make me forget where I came from, who loves me not despite my wealth, but despite my wealth. She smiled. That came out wrong, but you know what I mean. I do, Jake said, kissing her forehead. And for the record, I've never regretted falling for the woman who appreciated a single dollar more than most people appreciate a fortune. Because that was the truth of it, that morning on the bus. A CEO billionaire had her card rejected and needed help. And a junior architect with $5 to his name had helped because it was the right thing to do. Neither had known who the other was, what they would become to each other, how a single moment of kindness would ripple out into changed lives. All Jake had known was that someone needed $1. All Victoria had known was that someone had given without expecting anything in return. And from that simple exchange had grown something neither of them had been looking for, but both desperately needed. A love built not on wealth or status or what they could do for each other, but on mutual respect, shared values, and the recognition that the best things in life aren't bought with money. They're given freely, from one human to another, in moments when we choose to see each other's humanity. Sometimes it starts with $1.